everyone. This is Troy Lamel Stovall, CEO and Executive Director of Maryland TEDCO. And yes, I'm getting ready for the spring. Spring is here. Spring has sprung. And so I thought I'd break out some of my spring wear, particularly given our guest today. I really wanted to give her a sense of newness and recovery and the opportunities of hope that spring always brings. And so I want to welcome definitely one of our friends here in Maryland and friends of TEDCO, Christine Ross, who leads the Maryland Chamber. Christine, thank you for joining us today.
Oh, Troy, thank you for inviting me. It's my pleasure.
Cool. So let's just jump right into it. I like to really start these with having people tell their journey. And as I like to say, talk less to me and talk less to maybe that young lady out there who may hear about part of your journey and how you overcame and how you were able to move to being, the head of the chamber here in Maryland.
Sure, happy to talk about that. So I actually have an unusual journey. I got out of college with a music education degree and promptly couldn't find a job. So I pivoted to arts administration and learned the craft of public relations from a really fine practitioner. And then ended up working for a construction company in Washington, D.C. with the business development director, and really help them put some polish on their PR and their marketing pieces. And then I promptly got married and had 3 boys and stayed home for 10 years.
Wow.
In the midst of that, ended up getting divorced and suddenly had to reinvent myself. Music degree, and hadn't had a job in 10 years. So that was really an interesting time. And what I did is I started volunteering at the local museum, got back into marketing and PR, got my first chamber job up in Williamstown, Mass, and just fell in love with the combination of helping small businesses succeed, working on policy, and the whole idea of workforce development and that next generation of leader was pulled together. So all of that went back to school. Got 2 advanced degrees, one in business, an MBA, and a degree in marketing, a master's in marketing, and started going up through the chamber ladder. And what that means is I have a very understanding spouse, remarried quite some time ago, and it's a lot like being in the military. If you want to go up, you got to move.
Got to move, yeah.
So I went to Falmouth, Massachusetts on Cape Cod.
Mm-hmm.
Then I went down to Southwest Florida, Bonita Springs, right above Naples.
Naples, yeah.
And then I came up here 5 years ago, and each time ran a bigger chamber. And this one, being the state chamber, was extremely appealing leadership opportunity for me.
So that's a great story. And a part of what I hear in that story in particular is, and there's a lot of women out there who stop out to raise the family and the like, and being able to reentry. My wife has had that challenge, and so I'm living that. So if you could speak to that a little bit, because I think particularly as we move to talking about entrepreneurship, it sounds like one of the things for me of spring is around how you recreate and reinvent yourself. And I hear that in your story, and I think others need to hear that.
Yes, so it's something that I'm passionate about, and I try to help anybody who's trying to re-enter the workforce. And my recommendations start with networking. Join a junior league, join a network working group, whatever it is that sort of suits your fancy of where you think you'd like to work. Get out there and start meeting with people, because I found the women leadership, frankly, at the junior league were so supportive of me. And then you got to volunteer. Mm-hmm. So volunteering to do the silent auction at a museum or somebody's gala, helping them with their press releases, all of that rebuilds today's experience for your resume, and it's extremely relevant.
That's outstanding. So tell about the Maryland Chamber. So let folks know about the Maryland Chamber.
So the Maryland Chamber is an outstanding organization. We are the business advocacy organization for the entire state. And what that means is there are a lot of other associations out there, but we are the one organization that is comprehensively looking at every facet of policy that comes down as to how it will affect both the employer and the employee. And so I have a mighty team of 9 right now. We were a little bit larger pre-COVID, and they 2 full-time lobbyists, and probably 12 different volunteer committees that are made up of business leaders throughout the state of Maryland that help us move that ball up the field.
Cool. And so talk about entrepreneurship in that, the role that entrepreneurship has for Maryland. And Jen actually just got off a call with the Maryland Economic Development Commission, which I'm on, and they talked about that actually through COVID, we've seen a spike in entrepreneurship. We've seen a spike in the venture capitalists come to the state. So what have you seen from the chamber from that perspective?
Yeah, so we're seeing the same thing. And when we look at entrepreneurship, it's a great way for all kinds of people to invent themselves, reinvent themselves, or return from incarceration even.
Mm-hmm.
And we love it because entrepreneurs are growing the jobs for the state, while on the other side of it, the Maryland Chamber is working so hard to make the state more competitive. And so working with groups like TEDCO, you all are incubating those next big companies, and we love it.
That's cool. And we appreciate the support that you've given us and continue to give us and will give us as we move forward. So let's kind of pivot a little bit and just have a little fun. So let's just talk about you some more, if you don't mind. And let's talk about the big C, the COVID. So, January last year happened and you kind of, I'm sure you had all your plans, but tell me, we've been into this for a year now, obviously, probably a few more months to go. What's Christine done just to kind of keep her sanity? What have you done for fun or to break the monotony, as I call it? I'm not sure if it's the redundancy of the monotony that's killing us or the monotony of the redundancy, but one of those two is killing. So what have you done to deal with that?
So it's really true. And when you lead an organization, it's hard to think about yourself. I worry about my staff, their mental wellness, because it's been so stressful. But for me personally, I have been reading a lot, not necessarily the highest quality literature, to give myself a mental break. I won't say exactly what, but it's pretty PG rated. PG rated. And also riding my bike, getting out in the fresh air really, really helps me. And even working outside during the day, I try to move outside and just be in nature while I'm working. And that's very, very helpful too.
What do you think you're going to keep doing after we start, becoming human again? What are some of the things you think you're going to hopefully maintain that you picked up during this time?
Yeah, so I was a curmudgeon before COVID, and I was not a big fan of remote work. Was very reluctant to give up control. And what I realized is that I had top quality leadership on my team who could manage themselves very professionally is the first thing. And then secondly, we had no choice.
Mm-hmm.
And when we had to lock it down, luckily our technology was really strong and in place so that we could pivot to remote. And it's been fantastic. And I think the thing that I will do more of that I hadn't done before is have those one-on-one conversations with folks, because I kept trying to check in with all the different members of the team to make sure everybody was thriving. And when you can't walk past their office and even peek in and see how are they looking,
mm-hmm.
I think that's the thing that I'll do more of. And whether it's remote or in person, just taking that time to really dial in on the individual members of the team.
That's important. Yeah, I agree with you. I mean, I don't think we recognize those what I call the hallway, the water cooler conversations and the importance of those. And that's difficult to do because this is such we're so scheduled now, right? The impromptu-ness, if you will, has been lost because of the scheduling of COVID. And so I'm with you, how do you balance that? Because I think we've learned that, we could actually get some stuff done working from home and not having to be 5 days. And so, but so that's from a chamber organization, but what do you see for the state of Maryland? How has COVID impacted kind of that business opportunity for the state of Maryland?
Yeah, so it's been feast or famine. There are some folks that have had a fantastic experience and their business has grown. It's also been a balancing act for like our construction partners.
Mm-hmm.
The intensity of the oversight, the people coming to check and see if their employees are masked up. Are they 6 feet apart? Can you imagine building a major building in downtown Bethesda with those kind of restrictions. And so I think that's been a real challenge, but they have succeeded and thrived.
Mhm.
The thing that I worry the most about are the parents that had to stay home and try to work and manage children.
Great.
I didn't have that. Luckily, my boys are all out of the house, paying their own keep. Make sure I say that. And so they have been superheroes to me. The women, sometimes it's been the men, but to have a 3-year-old needing to be entertained and wanting them to grow in their knowledge base while you're trying to pay attention to what's happening day to day, it's been such a struggle. So I really applaud the parents that have managed it, and their marriages are still intact.
During the sanity.
Big
I
deal,
mean,
yeah.
so a couple of paths to go down there. One, I want to actually go back. You named a couple of industries, but if you could spend a minute talking about particularly the impact to the live entertainment and the tourism industry, and how you see that kind of playing out over this next year or so.
Yeah, so I mean, one of my sons is an opera singer, and
Oh,
his
wow.
world literally collapsed in the middle of April last year. His young artist program dissolved, and he had to reinvent himself. So I have a great affinity and also compassion for what all of those folks have gone through. So I think the recovery is going to be slow for them because people need to get vaccinated. And until we reach herd immunity, that's going to be the key. But after that, I think it's going to explode and people will be there more than they ever have because they've missed it so much.
Hmm. Yeah, I mean that's going to be the key. One of the statements I make is we can vaccinate, and I've been blessed. I've been able to get my first shot. We can vaccinate against this, but you can't vaccinate us against the fear. There's still going to be a set of folks who are not going to feel comfortable being
Sure.
around others, regardless of the vaccine.
Right.
And so, yeah, this is industry. And then the restaurants. How about the restaurants? How what are you seeing from that industry?
God love them. They really have been hit the hardest. Here in Annapolis, I was so gratified to watch people patronizing, doing the drive up, picking
Hmm.
up their meals, picking up their cocktails, even buying gift certificates and then sticking them
Isn't
on
that
the
cool? That
front
was
of the
cool.
fridge
Yeah, yeah.
just because. I mean, we did that, and over here on West Street and in the west part of downtown, we had so many, some that had just opened. One guy just lives up the street from me. And so we went down and bought gift certificates. And the other people that were impacted, the waiters and waitresses, some stayed on to help their owners stay in business. And they didn't get to collect unemployment, but they also didn't get tips. And so the dramatic impact of that's so crushing to me. And I want to thank them. I want them to have more support. And so I hope that people will return with a really robust affection for being out.
But what you're speaking to is, even in this era where there's all kind of political angst and the like,
Mm,
at the end of the day, the spirit, we all see each other as humans. At the
right.
end of the day, we see each other as humans, and we want to. And I think there's a part of us, regardless of the things that divide us, that we see another human hurting. We want to help that human, regardless. And so, what you just described is that, right?
I would agree with you 100%.
Yeah. So you mentioned also, because I agree with you, going back to you talked about what happens during this, because I've got 2 teenagers, and so they're self-sufficient. I mean, I joke, if we see our son once a day, we're happy, and we know he's still alive. But you're right, those with the little kids,
Oh, yeah.
having to be tutor and lunch person and technology person and do all those things, and then still do a job. And how they're going to transition out of this is going to be so. Anything you're hearing about how that's going to happen, because it's going to be, I think, not even how schools go back and how workers go back, and that unevenness is going to create, I think, some friction in some families.
Yes, it definitely is. So my husband's an 8th grade science teacher, and one of the things that he's seeing as they are re-entering the classroom is that the colleagues that do have young children can't put them anywhere. There isn't enough daycare.
Mm.
And so they aren't themselves able to return to school, even if they wanted to. And so the education piece of this, there's going to be much longer standing impact on that. We work really hard on getting the childcare centers reopened sooner with a greater capacity because of that. But I also think you're going to find that there are going to be a lot of single parents that are
Mm-hmm.
dropping out of the workforce, and majority are going to be women,
Mm-hmm.
and that's going to create a much longer problem.
Mm-hmm.
The kids have to come first. They'll eventually get to school, but they are going to have to put that priority first. And so what I think we'll see is some more reinvention, more entrepreneurship. People will
Mm-hmm.
figure out a way, whether it's Etsy or doing a startup in their garage. I think we'll see more of that, and they'll do it off hours, which means they're going to be exhausted.
Well, yeah, and I want you to speak on more of that because I think, particularly given this is a TEDCO Talks, people think of entrepreneurship as something that's got to lead to the next Google, the next Airbnb, and that's just not the case, right? Entrepreneurship is about seeing a problem and being creative about how you can solve that problem, right? And
Right.
so, what are you seeing there, and what's the chamber helping to do that, helping with that?
So the chamber continuously focuses on helping support the competitiveness of the state. And so when there are technology startup tax credits, we're going to fight for those and fight for them to be expanded so that when they come to the TEDCOs of the world, you guys have an even more robust ecosystem to support those businesses with. And then we do a lot of work with the Small Business Development Center and pushing people to work with them who don't even realize they can get free support all the way from the business development and getting your plan together for the bank, all the way to whatever marketing, second stage marketing, how to do your branding, all of that is there. And then if you really get going and you want to start exporting, there's support for that.
Mm-hmm.
So just making those connections and tying people to the proper resource for them, place like TEDCO, is really what it's all about for us.
That's standard. That's outstanding. That's great. So you talked about, because it's funny, the stats you mentioned about the women, they mentioned that also at the Economic Development Council, that women are leaving the workforce faster than men are for a variety of reasons that you mentioned. And how that's going to impact, how do we make our economy, because as we come out of this, how do we make it more equitable, more inclusive? How do we make sure that there's a participation that makes sense? And that's one of the things we're focused on in TEDCO is how do we make sure we talk about wealth expansion and wealth inclusion, but talk to our listeners about what the chambers on this whole diversity, inclusion, ensuring that as we grow our way out of this, that it includes a number of people that normally don't get included.
Sure.
And by the
So
way,
there,
you mentioned the returning citizens. So I really would love you to
yes.
speak to that.
So I'll speak to that, and then I'll speak to one other point. So we're pretty passionate about justice reform and second chance opportunities at the Maryland Chamber. And we see that as our duty to normalize the conversation about employing people who have been incarcerated, served their time, paid their debt to society, but now need a pathway, a runway
Yes.
to be successful, to recapture their lives, to take a leadership role in their families, to have a roof over their head. We see that as an imperative, because after that, suddenly kids are seeing mom or dad go to work on a regular basis. There's money in the bank, there's food in the refrigerator, and pretty soon they can start to normalize and go to school and do what they're supposed to do, which is to learn.
Yep.
And so I point out BG&E has a wonderful program. They're either in their third or their fourth cohort, where they've partnered with CivicWorks, and they are taking classes of 12 individuals. And CivicWorks is providing the social, mental support, and BG&E is doing the training. And these folks come out of that, and they could be entrepreneurs, but they could also go to work for BG&E in a really good living wage kind of a career.
I love it. Love it.
So we think that's the right thing to do to normalize the conversation with the business community. We'd like to get immunity passed for employers that do hire previously incarcerated to protect them from frivolous lawsuits. And hopefully at some point we'll get that across the finish line. And then the other part of it is to broaden the conversation about diversity, equity, and inclusion. And our toe in the water for that, because we really wanted to add to the conversation and we weren't sure where we fit in to everything that was going on. And so we created a 6-part series every other month where we bring in experts from our large multinational companies, and they are talking best practices. Because our small to mid-sized companies, they don't have the bandwidth to do this themselves. They don't have HR departments. And so by talking about what they're doing at BG&E and Comcast and Kaiser Permanente, we can show what's possible and then downsize it for the smaller business, provide takeaway resources that they can then use over time and make meaningful changes and action happen within their own 4 walls. And that's where it starts, small, but then it spins up into lots of people taking small actions.
I love it. And do you have, are there some metrics that you're going to be using to judge kind of the success of both of these programs?
Sure. So with the Equity and Inclusion webinar series, obviously we're paying attention to how many people are dialing in, but those resources are recorded and then they go onto our website as an evergreen resource, and we're watching how many downloads are happening after the fact. And so every couple of months, we push something out marketing wise that says, and don't forget, now we've done 5 of the 6 parts. You can go back and look at all of them. Like it's not one and done. And so that's really been helpful. On the other side, the second chance work is going to take a longer time. We need to make it an absolute part of the system in Maryland. And I know Secretary Green's working hard on this with his team, that before a person is released, they have every bit of paperwork they need to function outside those 4 walls, like the driver's license, the social security card, the birth certificate, those basic documents that would allow them to access resources. Maybe they need food stamps. Maybe they don't have a job yet. And then what we did was we toured lots of different programs like Second Chance, Civic Works, volunteers of the Chesapeake, and looked at the way that they're promoting. And then we made a resource page. And we put an op-ed in the Baltimore Sun, and we started getting letters from inmates asking how we could help them get training after they were released. And so I think that's one of the most gratifying things that's happened with my team. They got so excited about that. And we now have a resource and we send it out to them. And to Secretary Green's credit, he also has regional resource people that are applied to the various facilities. And we push their contact information out as well.
Oh, that's beautiful. So, I mean, and that's a group of folks who need, they need the help. And so that's so I'm, and whatever we can do. Matter of fact, we're thinking through, just so you know, we have what we call our builder fund, and that's for socially and economic disadvantage. And so one of the things, and we'll definitely work with you. How can we put part of that and focus it on returning citizens that might have entrepreneurial ideas that could eventually get funded through TEDCO? And so we'd love to work with you on that.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, we could create a web of the training programs that are out there and make sure that they're totally connected with you when somebody does come out. And Marty Schwartz at Vehicles for Change says, we spend a lot of time with these folks getting them ready to actually function. They didn't have cell phones before, they didn't have the internet. There's a lot of training beyond working on the engine in the car that has to go on to create a good, strong foundation for these folks. So connecting you with all of those programs would be a really good move.
I love it. Love it. So, Christina, as you back to COVID just a little bit, as you think about how you thought about, if you could, when you had your crystal ball, I'm sure you had a crystal ball, and back in January of a year ago, you had a sense of what you thought the chamber in Maryland would be 5 years from now. How has that shifted, if at all, because of COVID? What you thought 5 years from now Maryland Chamber would be doing and would be about, how has any of that shifted because of COVID?
Sure. So I think the realization that exponential change things are happening at a much, much faster pace.
Mhm.
There's less time to do some of these real imperatives that are going to make a difference. There is no time to wait to support the underserved and underrepresented.
I like that.
Has to be a part of every business's plan today, not in a year, today. And it doesn't matter how small the effort, it's the effort has to happen. And then I think we're going to see a much different work environment. So I'm
Mhm.
waiting to see what my team members want to do, if they want to continue virtual or
Mhm.
not. I actually think they miss each other, which is great. They want to just, hang out in the kitchen at lunchtime and catch up on what's going on in each other's lives. It's a little harder to do that during Zoom calls.
Yep.
And I also think that the legislators that we work with so closely have recognized that there are some things that are more important than others. And so I think we'll see a shift in the focus of legislation that's coming down, and health and wellness and family
That's right.
is going to be a bigger focus.
I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. I couldn't agree more. I think, yes, you know, I saw a report that we've adopted some of the changes, like in retail, the adoption of digital currency and all of us kind of ordering online. That
Mhm.
has we got 5 years of growth and 5 years of adoption in a year, just in that one sector. And you're right about construction, how construction had to modify and change, and how that's going to get carried over. But even to your point of live music venues, I think some of them got really creative about how they had to think about this and how they're going to translate that when we come out of this. So there's going to be a lot of interesting, and then digital health is I think, going to take off. Digital health is going to be just a huge issue. I mean, a huge opportunity going forward.
Absolutely. I love the fact that I could just get on a call with my doc and say, here's what's going on. I know exactly what this is. And you don't have to drive, and you don't have to expose yourself, and you don't have to sit there and wait. It's brilliant. And it would not have happened were it not for COVID. It would
Yeah,
have drug along. Adoption would have been really slow.
absolutely. Well, look, as we close, I want to have just a little fun. I'm going to say a few words, and first thing come to mind, kind of fast and furious. All right. Let's see what I want to start with. Annapolis.
Seafood,
Florida.
warm, warm, warm weather.
Massachusetts.
Snow,
COVID.
screeching halt. The economy.
The Maryland Chamber.
They are warriors. They are fighting for business, make the place more competitive, to give people jobs, more opportunities for internships.
And I have to close with TEDCO.
Awesome entrepreneurship, fostering amazing growth and amazing Maryland grown businesses.
Well, thank you for that. Thank you for that. Well, look, Christine, I can't tell you how much I appreciate you, appreciate your service to the state of Maryland, and obviously our relationship, and that will continue to grow from this. And thank you for all you do for Maryland, for the Chamber. Thank you for your time today.
You're welcome. Thank you, Troy.
Appreciate you. So to the listeners, thank you again. Hope you all have a super, super week, and we'll see you next week on TEDCO Talks. This is Troy Lamel Stovall signing off. Thank you.